standpoint of we can only speak to animation because at Pixar that's the medium that we work in. But this film in particular, I think we all embraced it as a real opportunity to feature the talent that is in the Latino community, both from the standpoint of the actors and actresses who do an incredible job bringing this film to life, and also behind the camera. We worked a lot with artists from Mexico, Mexican American or Latino backgrounds, to design the characters, to design the world, to build these worlds in the computer. In addition to teaming up with cultural consultants, because as we're developing the story, at Pixar we are we've had a lot of practice kind of cracking story problems and developing narratives, but we really needed to depend on, the experts in the field of Mexican culture. I'm Mexican American myself, but I can't say that I'm an expert in, Mexican history or Mexican music. But with our consultants, we're able to find those resources and really say, in this story, what can we go to show off the beauty, show off the things that are really deeply rooted in the culture, and do a just representation on screen.
To the last part of your question, when we first decided to make this film and tell a story set against this very real culture, we knew immediately that we had a huge responsibility to be accurate, to be respectful, and to never lapse into cliche or stereotype. And from day one, 6 years ago, we spent every single day doing everything we can to ensure that we don't do that.
Perdón, por favor.
Hi, I'm Johnny Carbona. I'm just a single boy with a dream, a huge Disney fan. Speaking about the accuracy of Mexican culture, sometimes for a lot of people, me included, Frida Kahlo is overrated. So I love the way in the movies portrayed it, because all the scene about the papaya and stuff, I was laughing because it's very accurate about being overrated. How do you feel about working with this huge, not only Mexican, but global culture icon like Frida Kahlo?
Mm-hmm. I don't know that I would want to attribute, understanding that Frida Kahlo is a huge icon, and as such, people have very strong feelings about her. What we really wanted to lean into in this film, especially in the context of Miguel, who is this artist who doesn't really have, he's got this passion, he's got this talent, but he doesn't necessarily know the pathway to pursuing it. And we thought, in this realm where you have the opportunity to meet all of the people who came before you, all of the artists who came before you, we thought that this is a perfect opportunity to give Miguel examples of people who use their art to affect the world around them. Amongst them, our Frida Kahlo, you've got, Jorge Negrete and Pedro Infante, and chief among them for our story is this fictional character, Ernesto de la Cruz. And we just thought there's such a breadth of incredible Mexican talent from history that we wanted to lean into it in a lighthearted way, to just really explore what it means to use your talent to change the world, and hopefully people find it engaging and entertaining.
And I love that throughout this film we have these strong, unique, complicated, iconoclastic women throughout the film, and Frida's one of them for me. And I think that is just a great, wonderful, beautiful thread that runs throughout COCO.
Hola, Eduardo González, el Grupo Asir, bienvenidos a México. Siempre que hacen este tipo de películas animadas en Pixar, en Disney, son como muy cuidadosos de no hacerlas muy locales. Aquí es una película totalmente mexicana pero ¿qué encontraron para poder exportar a otros países, para que la conciban también igual que nosotros la estamos viendo, con ese amor, ¿no? que están expresando por ser nuestra cultura, pero que en otros países también lo puedan concebir así?
It's certainly something we thought about when we first decided to make the film. You know, it is a very culturally specific film. We had never done a culturally specific film at Pixar before. But early on, as we researched Dia de Muertos and really grew to appreciate and understand the depths of the traditions, it became clear to us how important family, the idea of family was to the celebration. And the more we understood how important family was and the notion of the obligation that we have to remember our loved ones and pass along their stories to the next generation, and to make sure that they're never forgotten, we realized that that's a universal idea. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, we all have family. We all go through the ups and downs of dealing with our families, and so family is the center of the story that we're telling in COCO. So while, yes, the subject matter is culturally specific, the ideas are universal. And as we've begun to show the film around the world, it's become clear to us that people not only relate to the film because of those ideas of family, but we have found that there also is a great interest in learning about Mexican culture and an appreciation for everything that they do learn by watching the film and learning about what Dia de los Muertos is all about.
I think one of the most telling things as I've been working on this film is at Pixar, we're a diverse studio and that we're a lot of artists and a lot of technical folk who come from many different countries, many different backgrounds. And in our very first screening, these films kind of develop over the course of years, but even in our very first screening, a lot of the elements that ended up in the final film were there. And seeing how the studio in its diversity was affected by the story, you could tell that as people in different departments were working on this film, they were putting an extra bit of effort, an extra bit of heart, an extra bit of work into everything that they were doing. And we began to discover, as people emailed us within the studio, that a lot of people at the studio were doing it because it meant something to a relationship that they had. You know, it meant something to someone they loved, just working on this film that was about family, about remembrance. And a lot of them took it personally. And that was very telling to me that this was a story that had the power to affect anybody from any place. And I think you can see, think you can see how much heart all of the artists put into it because of that.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Buen día. Mi nombre es Dania del Río de Espectapop. Primero felicitarlos por la gran película, la verdad es que es un gran resultado para nosotros como mexicanos, es un gran orgullo. Mi pregunta iría directamente hacia los niños. Yo sé que esta película es para todo el público en general, pero quisiera saber ustedes cuál creen que sería el mensaje que los niños recibirían hoy en día, porque las tradiciones y las costumbres mexicanas se están olvidando cada día un poco más en las nuevas generaciones. ¿Cuál es la respuesta que ustedes creen que los niños y estas nuevas generaciones tengan con respecto a esta película?
I think, yeah, that's one of the things that I think is particularly special about this film is this idea of the traditions being passed down generation to generation. And the fact that our main character is of the youngest generation, and he doesn't necessarily rebel against the traditions of Dia de Muertos, but he does rebel against this tradition of no music. And I think that kind of can sit as a surrogate of a situation where when you know you live in a multi-generational household, sometimes maybe you don't understand or appreciate when you're young the value of the traditions of your family or the value of that connection between generations. And so my hope is that when families go to see this film together, they have a way to communicate the meaning and the value and the tradition of these things that you pass on generation to generation, the stories, you know, of people who came before you. One of the interesting things that we saw when we came to do research is the fact Dia de Muertos means something different depending on where you are in life. When you're a kid, you know, oftentimes you see kids in the cemetery and they're really bored and they don't know what to do with themselves and they're fidgeting. But as you grow older, as you become a parent, I'm sure as you become a grandparent or a great-grandparent, your relationship to those stories and to those people on the ofrenda and to the idea of passing down those traditions changes and becomes richer. And I think that comes from the responsibility of families to pass down those traditions.
On a side note, I just noticed all these years at Pixar, Lee and I have been there 25 years and been there since Toy Story, and always noticed how, it's my observation that we have these very kind of old-fashioned stories in a way, and old-fashioned values juxtaposed against this very cutting-edge technology, which I just really love that, and I've always thought about these films kind of as, in an interesting way, kind of like the grandparents telling stories to the children, and that's just kind of one of my observations over the years.
De este lado, al fondo, Alejandra Sánchez. Me gustaría saber qué tan cierto es que en un principio quería ponerle a la película Día de Muertos y pues finalmente se terminó llamando Coco. ¿Por qué fue?
What happened was very early on in the making of the film, you know, oftentimes we don't have a title for a very long time, or we'll just work with a code name for the title. And this was very early on in the first year of making the movie. One of the ideas that was kicked around was to name the film Dia de los Muertos. And so as a result, we filed some paperwork to register that title, as you always do when you have a title for a film. And in this case, that proved to be a mistake that we didn't anticipate and that we regret and we apologize for. It was never our intention to try to trademark the holiday itself. It was always just about the title. That being said, it was painful for all of us that happened, and we felt terrible about it because, as I mentioned earlier, from the very beginning of this project, we tried to do everything we can to be respectful and to be authentic in the story that we were telling, and of course that ended up sending the complete opposite message that we were trying to send. But we did try to correct it as quickly as possible and apologize for what happened, and we ultimately moved on to what became, of course, our actual title, which is COCO.
I think if anything good came out of that experience, it was just the fact that having worked with Lee and Darla and seeing the care that they were taking in the very early stages to be respectful, it only allowed the conversation about how much we needed to communicate with each other, with the broader company, and just be very, very thoughtful in all avenues about making a film like this about a real culture, about a real celebration, and that helped us to just really open up the doors to conversation with our cultural consultants, with everyone at the studio about how do we take care to make sure that this is done completely respectfully.
And that every decision was made with sensitivity, and it's been great, and everyone has been on board with seeing things the way we think.
Gracias.
Hi, I'm Regina Tiscareño from Radio Teens Puebla. First of all, congratulations, it's an excellent movie. And okay, what is the reason and how was the process of making a Mexican movie that talks about our traditions?
Well, hopefully we've made it clear how important it was for us to, of course, be respectful. For me, for all of us, when we first came down to Mexico, and then for all the subsequent research trips that we came on, when we traveled all over the country, we were in Morelia, and Lake Pátzcuaro, and Oaxaca, Guanajuato, many different places. We tried to absorb as much of the culture as we could to have it infuse itself into the film that we were making. But the most important part of those trips for us was the time that we spent with families. I requested before we even left on those trips that they arrange for us to embed ourselves with different families of different backgrounds all over the country so that we could spend time with them just observing their day-to-day life. And then during Dia de Muertos, having those families share their traditions with us, feed us, walk us to the town cemeteries, proudly show us their family cemetery plots, tell us about their own families. And we did that again and again and again. Since we knew Miguel was going to be from a family of shoemakers, we visited families of shoemakers. We visited families that had all kinds of different livelihoods, making papel picado, making mezcal, making mole, alebrijes. And all that time that we spent slowly made its way into the film, not just visually, but in the story that we ended up telling.
From a personal standpoint, it was also, really exciting to me to be able to tell a story that was based on the Mexican culture. Every film that you make, it kind of becomes a master's degree in whatever you're working on, and as story artists.
I know a lot about cars.
As story artists, as directors and producers, we're on this film for 4 years, and sometimes upwards of that. And so to be able to work on this film and kind of be steeped in my culture, call up my parents, ask about family stories, and find that the familial connection to a Pixar film, that's deeper than I've ever been able to go. And I think it helps to create a story that's unique for the studio, that is unique for the world, but for just strictly from a personal standpoint, I felt like, I'm very thankful for it because it's helped me to grow, to reconnect with my roots, and to create something that I'm very proud to share with my family in the United States and Mexico and beyond.
Hi, my name is Victor Vasquez from Comunicarla. Welcome to Mexico. First of all, this is a beautiful movie. You have a great movie to show the world. But we know to make this movie, it was necessary a lot of investigation for a long time for the culture here in Mexico. But what kind of things is the most important for you in your personal experience of that investigation? What kind of things do you learn about all of this investigation work?
I think the most important thing for us, like Lee mentioned earlier, is the families, really. Is the people and all the people that we met and all the stories that they told and all the things that happened when we were hanging out with the families. All those tiny little details, little anecdotes for our whole team, all of the artists that were with all of these amazing, warm, generous, kind, and super fun families. All those tiny little details made its way into the film. And then, just traveling throughout this country and being so inspired by the beauty of the country and the architecture and the details, and trying to represent that in our film. All of those things we hope made a beautiful movie.
I remember when I was growing up, I grew up in a generation that saw Toy Story and Toy Story 2 in the theaters, and you wouldn't believe how many college students, when I got to college, still had their favorite toys because all of a sudden they felt guilty about throwing them away. Because, it's a film that really narrows in on this relationship between your childhood and what these symbols mean. And I think for this film, what I've walked away with, having experienced the storytelling, the celebration, the family, I think it's going to do the exact same thing for people, but with their families and with their family stories. And I think when people finish watching this film, they're going to think, I need to be a good steward of my history, and I need to know the stories of the people who came before me, because it matters. And that's what's so beautiful about Dia de Muertos is it's about this responsibility to be keepers of those memories.
One of the most impactful things that we learned that I don't think any of us knew before we went into this project, we learned about this notion of all of us being capable of dying multiple deaths. And we learned this from several people who taught us about the rich traditions of Dia de Muertos. We learned that we die the first time when our hearts stop. And we learned that we die kind of a second time when we're buried, when nobody can see us any longer. But then we learned that we're all capable of dying this third and final death when there's nobody left in the living world who remembers us. There's nobody left who knew us, who can pass down our stories. And that, to us, had just an enormous impact. It was just such a powerful notion that we knew we needed to make it part of our film. And that notion, for those of you who haven't seen the film yet, is part of the bedrock of the story that we tell. And personally, for all of us, it's made us think, and it's given a lot more urgency to us to make sure that our loved ones are remembered. I have photo albums full of people that I don't really know, and I know that my parents know them, and that if I don't take the time to talk to them about those people and get their stories, that when my parents are no longer here, those people will all be forgotten. And so, as Adrian said, we're really hoping that people who see this film are ignited with a new urgency to learn their family stories and pass it along.
Hi, morning.